Hey, welcome to BJJ Mental Models, episode 61. I'm Steve Kwan.
I'm Matt Kwan.
BJJ Mental Models is your guide to a conceptual and intelligent jiu-jitsu approach. We're back here for one more episode on opportunities. This is starting to sound like one of those mastermind seminars about how to live the best life for yourself and how to unlock your inner potential.
Well, it's really easy how to do that. You just do jiu-jitsu.
That's true. Have you seen Ari Bolden's new hustle? It's great.
I'm intrigued.
Okay, please just hold on here. Listener, please hold. I'm going to read out an excerpt for you.
We could cut this out, but we won't.
No, we're absolutely not. Matt, stall for time.
Steve, tell the folks at home who Ari Bolden is.
Okay, so Ari Bolden, I don't know if he still likes to go by that name, but that's the name that he gave himself, and that's the name that he deserves. Ari Bolden is a very, very famous jiu-jitsu, quote, instructor, end quote, from Vancouver Island. This is the guy that Rob Bernacki brought up a few episodes ago.
It's Rob Bernacki's professor.
Yeah, Ari and Rob, their gyms are relatively close together, so that's why Rob brought him up. But Ari is best known for creating the Submissions 101 platform. If you've been training jiu-jitsu for any period of time, you've probably seen this. It's a website with a ton of videos on there. Ari was kind of one of the first main people to really make it big in terms of jiu-jitsu online video, but the fundamental problem was that he wasn't really super qualified, and a lot of what he put up there was sort of mostly made up or bad information. I remember going on there and seeing these crazy chokes with names like the pentagram choke or the Death Star choke, and it's just stuff that would never ever work. And I get it, you're trying to be creative. I make shit up too all the time, and that's cool.
Hey, he started in a time there really wasn't a lot out there.
Definitely. And that's one of the things where I give him the benefit of the doubt. I think that probably he was just trying to help and to provide information to people who didn't have it. But the problem was a lot of that information was just not good information. And we have much better sources of info now. Anyway, so the thing is, and again, Rob also mentioned this in the previous episode, Ari is now, he did finally get an actual jiu-jitsu black belt. And now he's got this weird hustle going on called First Strike that he's done with some former commando who had to resign due to I don't even really know. But anyway, here is, I'll give you an idea. He's got one of these landing pages. You know, when you go to these skeezy marketing sites and there's just a wall of text that would take you an hour to read. And then at the bottom, they've got a price tag or something. Anyway, here is an excerpt from this. It also goes on about Shanghai gangsters and police tactics and stuff. But here's my favorite paragraph in the whole thing. However, there are certain tricks you can use instantly to magnify your aura of alpha dog confidence and power even more. These closely guarded methods create a virtual shield around you and your loved ones and have been secretly taught to special operators, martial artists, spies, and bodyguards throughout the ages. So if you
Holy fuck.
Yeah, this is amazing. He's also got a book on advanced situal awareness, and it's just, oh God, it just goes on and on and on.
He is a legit, well, I don't know if you should say he's a cop.
Ari Bolden, I think he actually
RCMP,
is, but I'm not even sure.
VPD, Victoria.
I actually don't know, but I know that part of what he does is he also does have this police education program where he teaches these guys. I don't know. Anyway,
teaches them the aura of being alpha.
Yeah. So if you are a little beta bitch, and
if you're a gamma soy boy,
guys on the beach come up and steal your girlfriend all the time, I would recommend you go to Alpha. So you go to alphanation.com/first strike, where Ari Bolden and this other weird dude named Todd Lamb, who I believe basically specializes in teaching you how to get abs. They're going to teach you how to create this invisible testosterone shield that will...
Is that what Galvao does? It's invisible testosterone shields.
Maybe that's what these guys are going to actually use going forward as their excuse. I was absolutely not doping. I just did the Ari Bolden First Strike program, and I just got jacked, and my testosterone levels went through the roof.
USADA started testing for Ari Bolden's alpha male testosterone shield training.
Okay,
oh fuck.
let me see if I can find one other good thing. Okay. Okay, so here's another
This has really gone off the rails, this podcast.
But yet this is the best one we've ever done. Here's another excerpt. How vintage World War II combatives reveal the simple but terrible effectiveness of reactive or instinctive fight skills. Over 200 years ago, the Shanghai Municipal Police, pioneers of modern SWAT who operated in what was the most dangerous port city in the world, had an important realization. Here it is. When someone throws something at you unexpectedly, what do? You jerk your hands up, right? You don't even think about it. This is a reactive or instinctive action, and it formed the basis for a devastating approach to violent encounters, first developed by those Shanghai operators. And then it's got a picture of one like Chinese dude kneeing another one in the balls, and then it's got a picture of a Chinese dude like face palming another guy.
I hope he was accurate.
Yeah. Anyway, basically, the long and the short of it, I believe, is they studied these deadly killer techniques, and now these two are just able to generate testosterone shields around themselves. Also, on this site, there is a giant picture of a black belt with a big, like, no symbol over top of it, like
we
no smoking.
We are not real black belts.
No, that's not how they say it. What they say is, in the real world violent counter, a black belt may do you more harm than good. You see, martial artists assume there are rules. Even MMA has a handful of rules that need to be respected, but the bad guys don't follow the rules in the real world. So,
Jesus.
Yeah, I know.
It goes on and on, too,
dude,
right?
This is like a John Grisham novel in terms of how long this page is. It is it's ridiculous. I think my whole computer is slowing down just loading it, so I'm going to close it now. Anyway, if you want to learn more about this incredible scam, it's alphanation.com/firststrike. And if that domain name doesn't give you enough of a red flag, then check it out yourself and let me know what you think. And if someone wants to take the bullet and buy this thing for $29, I would love a review. I would not that I really necessarily support this and want you to spend money on it, but I would love someone who's actually taken this program to tell me if it
for comedic value, please.
I want to know, did you experience hair loss? Did you grow more facial hair? Did your biceps enlarge?
Did you get acne?
Yeah, did you get acne? Did your testicles drop a little bit? These things I all want to know and understand. So please do write in and tell me.
I want to be more alpha.
Yeah,
that would
me
help
too.
so much in jiu-jitsu.
We should do an episode on how to be alpha. Do we know anyone who's really alpha who could give us good advice?
I mean,
you and I are so beta.
Well, speak for yourself. I think alpha just refers to being a natural leader more than anything, does it not? I don't think it means you're macho or
no. What is
strong even.
What is supposed to mean is you have confidence and you have a leadership aura. But where the whole alpha thing kind of gets weird is it all stems from that whole thing about how wolves have a pack and there's an alpha male who leads the pack. That actually apparently isn't true from what I understand. It's kind of a myth. But anyway, the idea has perpetuated that some people are just alpha and they kind of run things, and to some
extent, a way to label people as their personalities.
I think so.
I think there is some truth to it, though. Could you say that someone is whatever beta or gamma or whatever? It's no one really can put an absolute label on you.
There is definitely some truth to...
Yeah, there's some truth to it. You could have a personality where you're not a natural born leader, but you're a very good right-hand man. And that'd be your Bravo, right?
Yeah.
And that's a real thing. There are guys that are extremely effective.
Eddie Bravo?
Yeah. No, he's alpha.
Okay, because you said that would be your Bravo, so I was confused.
Yeah, Bravo is that's the right-hand man to the alpha.
Okay, so Eddie Bravo is alpha even though he's Bravo.
Yes.
Okay, holy shit, this episode is a waste of time.
Let's restart.
No, let's not. Okay.
Sorry, listeners. This is not an April Fool's episode, by the way. This is real.
That's maybe a wasted opportunity for an April Fool's episode.
God.
Yeah, so far anyway, just in case you zoned out, let's start the episode in earnest now. But yeah, the summary is Ari Bolden's thing probably doesn't work. The alpha thing is a myth, but it does have maybe some benefit in terms of just labeling people, because the reality is some people just do seem to kind of be more natural leaders than others.
That's true.
Yeah. Anyway, so today we wanted to talk about creating opportunities. We talked in the last episode about identifying and exploiting opportunities, but how do you go about creating these things? Sometimes when you're sparring with someone who's just really, really good, there is not an obvious opportunity. Hey, if someone puts their leg out in front of you and you can grab it, or they stick their arm in your face and you can drag it, go for it. But against someone who is just really, really good and has their alignment under control, sometimes they just don't give you anything. And also sometimes if you're sparring up a weight class, if you're fighting someone who's much bigger, it gets a lot harder to actually exploit an opportunity. You can't just grab a guy's arm and drag it if he's just that much bigger or stronger than you. So we want to talk about some strategies for how you can create opportunities when there aren't any readily available. Now, of course, the best strategy is just to be an alpha dog and establish alpha dog confidence by taking this program. But failing that, some other methods that you can use, that's kind of the stuff that we want to talk about today. Are we actually going to be able to do this episode, or have we just killed the whole fucking thing at this point?
I don't know.
Okay.
We definitely can't show our faces around Victoria.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, anyway, so one thing that we can use to start off this conversation and maybe get back onto a semblance of normalcy, a lot of the time I find when you want to create an opportunity, the reason why you aren't able to do it is because the other guy is dictating the pace, right? If you are constantly the one on the defensive because the other person is always one step ahead of you, you're going to be so preoccupied with what you're doing and with just staying alive that you're not going to be able to actually create any or find any opportunities until you turn the dial and you are now the one who's back in control. So maybe that's something that's good to talk about here, Matt. When you're the one who's basically just getting punished, like you're up against someone who is dictating the tempo, you're just so focused on being reactive. What can you do to get the ball back in your court?
Oh, God, such a bad position to be in. It's happening to me in training today too. I was sparring and I got blitzed, and I got caught in one of those tornadoes where you're just constantly framing. And
yeah.
It sucks because you just can't catch a break. I think one of the best things you can do is get control of their base. So whether that means getting a grip on a pant leg or both pant legs, or if you can get a grip on their collar and get underneath them, cause Kuzushi. Lately, I've been doing a lot of lapel stuff, so I like to use
we know.
Put someone in a lapel lasso and slow them right down. I think that's a great way to do it as well as use like an unfamiliar guard or uncommon guard.
Defying expectations is a good way to do it.
Essentially, breaking their alignment is the best way, and that usually starts with either isolating a lever or getting some kind of grip and then breaking their balance. It could also mean simply getting back to the engagement phase of guard and making enough space to reset a clean start. Right?
Yeah.
So under a situation where you're getting blitzed or you're under attack from a really aggressive opponent, you got to look for an opportunity to reset. I find it's very rare that I will get attacked by a high level, aggressive, highly skilled opponent and then be able to just reverse them. That's kind of easier to do on lower ranks, but on someone who's my skill level or even higher, I find that it can be really tricky because they're usually in such good alignment that won't work. Usually getting a dominant grip or a 2-on-1 or a dominant angle is or underneath them is sort of where I like to go with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what you mentioned is a really good suggestion, which is if you're getting blitzed, slowing things down is probably one of the first priorities that you want to attempt.
Lapel Encyclopedia.
Yeah, this is especially easy. I mean, I don't want to say easy. It's a lot easier in the gi because there's just so many ways that you can entangle someone and tie them up and slow them down. The lapel is an awesome way to do it because if you're playing a lapel guard, usually you can enter these guards without too much difficulty. Grabbing the lapel, if it's free, is often pretty easy. I mean, sometimes it's tied up in the guy's belt, but if it's dangling, it's a good option. But generally, if you can just slow the momentum and get things back to a stable point, then you can start to mount a more aggressive attack and actually get control of the pace again. The problem that I think a lot of people make is they try to match intensity with intensity. I mean, if the other guy is dictating the pace, that's not a good time to be scrambling. The mistake that people sometimes make is they respond by trying to escalate and scramble as quickly as the opponent is doing. I don't think you want to do that when you're losing the tempo. Yeah, I think that's, if you can escalate the pace if you have the tempo on your side of the court. But if the other guy is just constantly barraging you, trying to match his speed, it seems unwise. I would suggest either you slow it down or Another thing that you can do, and you mentioned this as well, is do something unorthodox or outside of expectation. So let me give an example. I used to have this problem a lot of the time where guys would do like the bullfighter pass on me, or they would do like the double over pass. Like wrestlers, for example, love this.
Yes.
And I got really frustrated by this because guys would do this and I would just hip escape like crazy. And it would never work. They would just drive forward and forward and forward, and I'd burn a ton of energy, and we'd move about 10 feet down the mat, and then eventually they would pass. But taking that kind of approach where you just hip escape, that plays into their expectation. I found if you do something a little bit different, like if you invert and try to turtle or roll away, that kind of might go against their expectation and make it challenging for them to complete the aggressive attack that they were doing. So yeah, sometimes just defying the person's expectation, shaking it up, playing an unusual guard, turning the wrong way. I mean, as long as you can do that without getting choked out or getting caught in a joint lock, that kind of thing can break out of the tempo and allow you to reset and get control.
Yeah. And I think two of my favorite answers for that example, that double overs pass that wrestlers do. The first one that is my go-to is get up. I always want to get into base. Mm-hmm. I always want to get on my hand or my elbow and then establish a frame between myself and him, usually my forearm in like a collar type pattern. Or another option would be hitting a switch, which is a classic wrestling move where you do like an underhook on the leg and essentially you switch your hip and elevate his leg as a lever, and you can get on top that way. So, but it is a little bit more grindy, I think, rather than just resetting the distance, which is a common answer that I would have for someone who's blitzing, is just try to manage the range in such a way that you can reset and get grips.
And the switch is a great example of how to kind of break out of the existing pattern. You basically are changing the direction of the fight. So if all of that aggression is coming at you from one direction, you can kind of change the angle to a different one. And that's actually another interesting way to generate opportunities where there aren't any, is to exploit dominant angles. It is so important at all times to try to take a dominant angle. And by that, we mean basically you can face your opponent. Most of the time, that's what that means. You can generate base towards your opponent. You can attack them, but your opponent is denied the ability to attack you. Usually that means they're not able to look at you. I mean, I don't know if there's any counterexamples to that. But generally speaking, when we talk about dominant angles, we mean you are able to face your opponent and attack them, but they are kind of forced to look away from you. That's why, for example, taking the back is so beneficial, because you can attack the person and their ability to use their arms and their legs to attack you is very much mitigated. So I find when I'm sparring with someone who is just giving me nothing, like I'm stuck in they're stuck in my guard, but I can't do anything and they're just kind of hunkering down. Continuing to try to force, like, to pull them down is sometimes not necessarily that effective, but you can start to like scooch around and maybe try to take their back or do something like that. And even if you don't really have good control over them, that will at least force them to respond. You can really, really put down a much superior opponent just by getting a dominant angle on them. Like, even if they're a lot bigger than you, getting a dominant angle can equalize a lot. Like, if you look at some of those old Marcelo Garcia fights, when he's fighting just gigantic dudes, he's always going around and trying to take their back. That's basically getting a dominant angle.
Yeah. Danaher always says against a bigger or stronger opponent, either try and get to the back or get underneath them, right? With like an inside channel.
Yeah.
Type position. One thing Oliver Taza showed me last time he was here that was really great. He did a seminar at my school on open guard and basically how do you make your open guard offensive in no-gi. And one of the things he showed was, if you're playing like a butterfly guard and your partner's on his knees and he's just basically being like Paul Juarez and just like hunkering down on his knees and not letting you move him and hand fighting you to the point where you can't isolate an arm drag or whatever, and you really can't do much. Basically, what he showed was he tries to gain what he calls height advantage. So you're almost doing a technical stand with a collar tie in hopes to create a reaction from your opponent, and this plays into the momentum and center of gravity thing. If I'm going to push into you, I can expect that you're probably going to give me force back. And if I pull you down, I can expect that you're probably going to try and pull yourself away, right? So using these predictable reactions, he sets himself up, whereas if you can heist and get a height advantage, then you might be able to start looking either for a sweep or bullying the guy over, or if he tries to drive back into you, you can either hit him with a nice hook sweep, like a sumigaeshi, or you could even possibly snap his head down into a front headlock position. So he had like 3 or 4 different predictable reactions from this collar tie hip heist movement that creates a lot of basically what the idea is that it forces your opponent to react. So you kind of want to not give them any other option but to react, where it would be dangerous for them to just sit still. And how does he do that? By getting height advantage. So that was kind of like a cool example of a way to create a reaction on someone that I'd never thought of, because I had thought, hey, if I stand up, it kind of creates vulnerability. But what it actually does is it forces him to either match your height or to try and tackle you to the ground, in which case, sumigaeshi.
Well, it's just like, when you're confronted with like a hyena or something, you want to make yourself tall, so you stick your hands up in the air. I actually don't know if that's true or not.
Is that even true?
I don't know. Yeah. On that note, do you want to have a little break and talk about this Alpha Nation thing again? Because I have an update. So Todd Lamb, the other guy who made this program, is a disgraced former police officer who was he actually resigned after the department launched an investigation on him for these ridiculous programs. He made
Really?
Yeah, this program is joint created by Ari Bolden and Todd Lamb. And this guy, it looks like he was on like the Saanich police force or something. And he made some like how to get rock hard alpha abs video. But he used, I don't know, but he used like footage of him like firing a gun, and he had like he had clips of like other police officers, and the police department basically said, homie, this isn't cool. And they launched an investigation on him, and he resigned before he could presumably get fired. But yeah, anyway, I think it was called like Spec Force Alpha. So this guy's got like a bunch of these hustles.
I just feel bad now.
It's amazing.
It's depressing more than anything.
I know. This is our police force, ladies and gentlemen.
He'll always have his sweet abs, though.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I am kind of envious. Maybe if I sign up in this program, I'll get those amazing abs.
I hear the program boosts your test.
Yeah, I know. So I've heard. Okay, so another thing that I want to talk about, this actually more on topic. That's a really good point about dominant angles. And this is something that I learned a long time ago. As a smaller guy, when I'm playing guard against a bigger guy who's sitting in my guard, I cannot always force him to come down to my level. I cannot always pull him to the ground. But one advantage that a smaller person does have over a big person is the ability to level change much faster, right? If you're a lot bigger, it's going to be harder for you to do like a technical stand up or a technical sit, right? Whereas if you're a small person, you can switch that level so quickly. And one thing that works really well is, like you said, make yourself taller. If the other person is down low and you do a quick technical stand up and now you're on top of them, you've created a dominant angle where you can actually sometimes you can either force them into being on bottom in guard, or you can force them to turtle. When I'm fighting a bigger guy and I'm able to get on top, this is normally how I do it. It's not that I hit some sweep on them. It is I suddenly level change and then I am up high before they can get up high, and they cannot react quick enough. So either they go into turtle or they're forced backwards into guard. I find as a smaller guy, even if you're very efficient with your sweeps, it's hard to load someone's body weight up onto you and turf them. But it's a lot easier to just get up faster than they can get up. Yeah. So something to think about. That's a good way to make openings, especially if you're really frustrated with someone in your guard and you just can't get a lever, you can't break their posture. Consider just like bailing and then standing up. Some advice that I give to my students is to remind them, there's no rule when you're sitting down that you need to sit there. Like we kind of get blindness to this where we're playing guard, and we kind of forget that like there's no jujitsu rule saying that you have to sit there and play guard. If you can get an advantage by just sitting up, getting up before your opponent, that's totally fine. And that still counts as a sweep from what I understand, right? If I just do a technical stand up and I push you over and now you're on the bottom, I believe that's 2 points.
Yeah, like one of the classic examples of somebody stalling or just shelling up is like when you mount them and then they just take their hands and do like the Home Alone, and then they just
which is
don't move.
that is such a stupid strategy. And of course, everyone does this at some point because most people are taught to do this. And
It's like in judo, if you lie belly down and just wait for the referee.
Yeah. My instructor eventually gave me shit for this because, I mean, I was taught when I was a white or a blue belt that, you know, when someone mounts you, you bring your hands up and you do the home alone so that you don't get choked. But something that my instructor eventually pointed out is, look, you're not getting out of there by doing that. Like, yeah, you can sit there and maybe slow down the choke, but you're not actually defending with any meaningful purpose. Like, all you're doing is making it marginally more difficult for the other person to attack you. And all that means is instead of being stuck there getting choked for 30 seconds, you're going to get stuck there getting choked for 2 minutes. Like, every defense that you employ needs to be with the intent of getting you out of that position. So I don't like defenses where you just basically shell up and do nothing. You need to be always looking for a way to advance and escape that position and get back to a better spot. There's never that I'm aware of a good situation where that kind of stalling is smart, unless, of course, you're running out the clock.
Yeah, exactly. There might be a situation in a competition where it makes sense to stall to run out the clock, but in general, it's not really a good strategy. And it's not. It basically shows you don't have answers. You know, unless you're ahead on points or whatever. But even in the gym, don't be that guy that's just taking it. Rob calls it taking it your ball and going home.
The best thing to do, of course, is if you are that guy, then you need to, while your opponent is mounted on you trying to choke you, you need to continuously lecture them about what they're doing wrong.
Yes.
Yeah. that is, by the way,
It's
like,
never going to work.
No, that is the ultimate, like, high level way of saving face when you're like a black belt, is when the blue belt mounts you and is kicking your ass. You just kind of stop the roll and just explain to them why what they're doing isn't going to work and finish the fight while they're kicking your ass. And then you can claim the higher ground.
Yeah. When people do that, like, Home Alone shit, or they just shell up and they don't do anything, generally I'll just start attacking their face.
I am aware.
I just put my chest and my gi right on their face and I just force them to frame, because if they don't, they can't breathe.
Yeah. And
So
one
I
thing to
just
bear in
cover
mind
their
too,
face.
like, if you have someone on your back and you want to try to just shell up, just be aware, because I have learned this the hard way. There is no rule in jiu-jitsu preventing the other guy from just cranking the fuck out of your nose.
And that's actually, I actually saw, you know, I'm not sure when this episode is going to be released, but the Fight to Win was on the other night, and Michael Liera Jr. from Logos Jiu-Jitsu, originally Atos Jiu-Jitsu, did basically tune this guy within a minute, pulled guard, took his back, and then immediately once he took his back, he just took both of his hands, clasped them together in front of his head, and just pulled them straight back.
Oh,
and
yeah.
the guy was covering his neck, but the hands went right into the bridge of his nose, and from there the choke just opens up, because obviously if someone attacks your face, you don't have the ability to stop a choke. You know, your posture is so broken and you're so shocked that your face is getting attacked that you quite often will leave your neck open.
Yeah.
And you'll see a lot of the Danaher guys will start reaching across the face to create such reactions. You know, it's, if you're playing a gentlemanly style jiu-jitsu where you're not going to be there will be no touching of the face, you know, and no cranking of the neck, then you can just do the Home Alone and you're usually not going to get choked.
10 years from now,
That's why I just crank the face.
10 years from now, every jiu-jitsu practitioner is going to look like Voldemort. Like, in addition to having the cauliflower ears, there's going to be no nose.
Yes.
You know, maybe that's the next, like, competitive advantage, is people just start cutting off their noses so that they can grapple better.
Yeah, it's like Nicky Rod said. He said one day, he's like, "Hey Danaher, I don't know about all this straight jacket control stuff, but if I get it under his eyebrows, I'm putting that motherfucker to sleep." And it's like, yeah, you know what? At the highest level, you do see that a lot, especially in like an ADCC or a tournament where you're allowed to basically face crank the entire face. Like IBJJF, I don't think you're allowed to. I'm below the nose you're not allowed, or above the nose you're not allowed to?
I actually don't know, but this is an important thing to understand if you want to talk about creating opportunities, is, again, tying back to win conditions. Like, know the rules of the game, because the problem is there are some things that we don't do, not because they're illegal, but because they're not considered good etiquette, right? Some things are illegal under certain rule sets. Like if you knee reap in IBJJF, that is illegal. But some things are although not nice, they're not technically illegal. And we get used to training without doing these things because we've been told that it's not nice. And we're probably right that it's not nice to do so. But there are situations where someone can like crank your nose, right? I mean, in a competition, you can just gi burn the guy's face. Like there's a lot of things that...
It's even worse.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that you can do that are totally legal. And if you train in like a gentlemanly way with like the Queensberry rules of what's okay and not to do in jiu-jitsu, then you're going to create this basically a hole in your game where you're not using these things. I mean, I remember I've trained with guys before too where I've kind of forgot that, oh yeah, they can actually just like forehead or nose crank you. And I go and I pull turtle as I do, and then they nose crank me and it sucks.
Yeah,
So understanding what the rules actually do and don't allow is a good way to create opportunities, because if there's something that's effective and your opponent does not realize that you can do it, then that's always going to be a competitive advantage.
Yeah. And, there's lots of situations where baiting can create opportunities. Like sometimes when I'm on the back and I'm trying to look for chokes, I will sort of leave my hands as almost trying to play mental games as if my hand is coming from the side, and they can feel it, they can see it, they have to react to it. Otherwise I can gain control of their wrist, or I can get like across their face or whatever. And then just from there, just create reactions until the neck becomes open.
Yeah.
Baiting. And also, in a situation where you have mount and they're shelling up, I think making your opponent uncomfortable as you can by breaking their alignment is a really good choice too. Like,
yeah, just taking the fight out of them basically by just making life suck. Like,
yeah,
that's an interesting thing, right? It doesn't matter how composed you are and how experienced you are. Everyone has a limit in terms of what they're willing to tolerate before they kind of go into panic mode. There can be a very, very high level seasoned grappler, but man, if you mount him long enough and you cut off his oxygen, like eventually he's going to start making stupid mistakes. So that's another thing to do as well. But to your point, another solid strategy across the board is to mask your intentions, to just make sure that it is not totally telegraphed what you want to do, because so many moves in jiu-jitsu become harder if your opponent knows and can brace against it. I remember, black belt Gary, right? There's a guy in Vancouver who's very well known, a little Asian dude named Gary, who is a black belt. I used to train with him a long time ago, back when I was a white belt. And I remember one time he said to me, Steve, you're telegraphing everything. And at the time I didn't think much of it. But because I kind of thought, being a stupid white belt at the time, well, when I get good enough at jiu-jitsu, it won't matter if I telegraph things, because I'll be so good I can force them to happen.
I'll be alpha.
Yeah, I'll be alpha. Like I will have my invisible testosterone shield is going to be so thick, like I won't be able to get through customs at the airport. Yeah. No, but I used to have this mistaken conception that like the thing that made you good was that you could force things to happen. But I realize now that the thing that makes you good is you can flow through these scenarios and create opportunities for good things that will happen. You don't try to force something that's just not there. So it's so important to mask your intentions, right? If you just grab the guy's arm and you're clearly trying to armbar him, he's going to be able to defend. But if you grab your arm and he thinks you're trying to armbar him, but you're actually not, and you're baiting him and tricking him, that's a very, very good high-level strategy.
Yeah. And that all comes with time in terms of predictable reactions and chaining together attacks and having multiple dilemmas at the same time. I think that's one of the most useful things you could do. Like, take an example of like a situation where you're combining multiple systems, like a crucifix. You're on the back, you might be attacking an armbar or usually a kimura or even a triangle. It's like you're giving the guy the choice. Do you want to get armbarred, or do you want to get choked? Or do you want to get kimura'd? Or and then there's not, you can just switch back and forth and go flow throughout the systems as long as your position's good enough and the guy can't move. That's usually my crucifix game, and just keep attacking. Once I feel that, I'm going for the choke and I feel that he mounts a good defense, I switch off to the arm and I start attacking the arm now, and then back and forth. Another example of, it's time for me to do my, my usual episode fillet of Keenan Cornelius's Lapel Encyclopedia, and just mention how he's been doing something that's really cool and like honestly so simple that I can't believe I never really thought of it. And that's he's taking his all of his lapel positions and he's basically adding something called worm wrestling, which is basically where whatever position you have, whether it be like a squid guard or a worm guard, you essentially just take your leg out of the quote wormhole and then come up and wrestle with the lapel between the legs. And it's like super effective.
Is that the same as the dental cloth thing?
Essentially, some positions it is, yes. But he has made all of his trademark positions, like the worm, the reverse della worm, the squid, all that stuff. And now he's basically adding the concept of the dental cloth to that. For those who don't know, dental cloth is a term that I heard Cyborg created. I've seen him do it maybe 20 years ago in an instructional, and it's like a half guard technique where you just pass the lapel through the legs. Been around for decades, super effective still to this day. And Keenan's basically taking that concept and he's finding different ways to do it within his system, and it's super effective. Like if you have a squid guard on someone and then you take your leg out and you turn the corner and come up and double leg the guy, it's like damn near impossible to stop.
Yeah.
And then the great thing that he's doing now is he's doing what's called platinum passing, which is what he calls his lapel passing. So he'll have that grip that he swept you with, and now he's using it to pass your guard.
He's like a monkey with his hand in the cookie jar. He never lets the lapel go once he's got it.
Well, yeah, like once you have that lapel, you can basically frame the guy's leg to the ground, and then he has a variety of different passes and grips and stuff. It's super cool. Like it's a really cool program. But yeah, like just that could be an example of creating action, creating opportunity when the guy stifles you, because a lot of people have the ability to, once they get caught in a worm guard, they can't really stop it. Like they can't easily escape once it's set up, but they can base out.
Yeah,
and they can stall. So a good answer for that is worm wrestling.
So there's two good mental models there that you discussed. One, of course, is the concept of a dilemma. The word dilemma, what it basically means is someone has two choices and they both suck. And in the context of jiu-jitsu, I mean, John Danaher very much popularized this concept, and that's so critical. If you can give your opponent if you force them to choose between two different options, both of which are bad, and you are ready to act on both of those options, you're in a very, very good state.
I'll say this. I actually heard Ryan Hall say it first.
Maybe he did. I mean, neither of them invented the word dilemma, but
they invented dilemmas.
Keenan invented worm guard. John Danaher invented dilemmas. They never existed prior to...
People didn't have dilemmas.
Yeah, people did not have dilemmas until John Danaher invented them. It's like he opened Pandora's box and dilemmas came out, and that's why the world is the way it is today. The other thing you talked about there, too, is that you mentioned that Keenan is wise enough to abandon that technique when it's not working and immediately switch to something else. I think a big part of where people get stuck is they have something, they want it, and they don't realize that they would be better off abandoning and moving on to something else. That's very much a junior belt mistake. They will try to insist on something that isn't there. And a lot of the time, the key to really creating good opportunities is to know when it's time to give up your current attack plan and move on to something different.
Definitely. Yeah. And that takes, again, experience.
Yeah. Do you want a story?
I mean, of course.
Yeah, okay.
I have a child's mind. Obviously, I want a story.
They just laughed when this pencil-necked little guy planted himself between two massive thugs and his wife. But within seconds, nobody was laughing anymore. This guy, Steve, and yes, they used the name Steve, had both his aggressors stunned on the floor, wondering what had happened while he quickly pulled his wife to safety and got the hell out of there. Yet he had never trained in martial arts, and his only belts were for holding up the pants of the suits he wore to work every day. So how did Steve, a short, skinny, and kind of flabby guy who doesn't work out, it's like he knows me.
Can I guess?
Yeah, and who has never stepped foot in a martial arts studio, lay out these two aggressive guys twice his size?
Can I guess?
Yes.
He's alpha.
He's fucking alpha. He's alpha, man. I mean, I've been telling, so this is the version of Steve that I need to be. This is, of course, another lovely excerpt from this wonderful site. Like, if I were to sit here and read this thing in its entirety,
is this supposed to be a real story?
I don't know. I think it's one of those marketing tricks where you tell an emotional story and then people will be invested and they can project themselves into the character. Anyway, I don't know. I'm amazed that they actually use my name though, so I feel kind of like this is really tailored to me. Yeah. I mean, they're describing me to a T. So except that I do know martial arts and I don't buy into this crazy program, but otherwise, it's basically me.
Did you beat up two dudes?
I can't even beat up one dude. Yeah, no, I'm not nearly alpha enough for that. What were we talking about?
Rory has a submissions 101 rash guard.
Rory has, you know what?
And he wears it.
No, I'm
awesome.
I'm not surprised because I know Rory has talked in the past about how before he knew basically how the world works, he was like a Submissions 101 fan. And
Yeah, totally.
yeah, then he kind of outgrew that. So, although apparently he didn't outgrow the rash guard.
Because Ari used to be 10th Planet, right? But then Eddie Bravo was like, look, dude,
I
you're
don't
too crazy for me.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what happened. Ari, I may be wrong. I think he was. But then when he finally got his black belt, it was from Keith Owen, right?
Yes, Master Keith Owen.
I actually don't know much about Keith Owen except that people are always pooping on him.
You know, you guys, you should be looking up Ari Bolden's brown belt test on YouTube if you can.
Is there a video out there of that?
It's amazing. If you can find it on there, it's Ari. He goes by Ari K now. I think it's Kazarian. Is that what he calls his last name?
I saw the name somewhere on this giant website.
Before he changed his name due to fraudulent behavior, I think he went by Ari Bolden. And there's a video of his brown belt test publicly on YouTube. It's amazing. It's basically a kata with like Street Fighter music, and there's like neck snapping, and it's just Keith Owen is just like all over it with his little clipboard, just marking it. It's awesome.
I kind of hate martial arts sometimes. If I told you that, God. Like it's martial arts. I love jujitsu, but martial arts are also so stupid in a lot of ways.
Oh, he's doing these ridiculous sequences that are basically a blend of Japanese jujitsu and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. Like it's none of it is stuff that you see at the highest level. Mm-hmm. And there's a room full of like kids watching this test and like other
part
students,
of history,
and they're just applauding. Like, ooh, ah. Like, oh God, some of the moves are really bad. But anyways, if you guys want to lose 10 minutes of your life, check it out. It's pretty awesome.
You've already lost 40 minutes of your life because of this stupid podcast. So that extra 10 minutes is not really that big a waste. Okay, let's talk about technique chaining. We mentioned this briefly, but a lot of the time you got to kind of wear down someone. If they have really, really good alignment, there won't be an obvious attack. So very often I find anyway that a single attack doesn't work very well. You often have to have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C. And in fact, this is the way a lot of instructors teach, right? Is when they have a class, they usually have a plan where they show you 3 different moves or whatever that chain off of each other. The reality is that a lot of the time the first attack isn't going to work. So the question is, when the first attack doesn't work, do you know what to do in all of the other scenarios so that you can fluidly move on to another attack? And the reason this is important is because every time you attempt an attack, even if it fails, it breaks your opponent's alignment just a little bit. Yeah. And then when you do another attack, just a little bit more. And the first attack might not work, the second, the third, the fourth, but maybe the fifth one will. And this is why a lot of the time when you see 2 experienced grapplers fight, it's not like someone just whips an armbar out of nowhere and then it's done. There's a very fluid exchange of constant motion and transitions.
It might look that way to the naked eye, or the untrained eye, I should say. You're definitely right about that. And basically what we're talking about is cornering somebody or funneling an attack sequence into several options that you're going to be happy with, but you're kind of playing with your partner and cornering them to the point where they can't defend any longer. And it's really important to also remember that during this process you can't or you shouldn't break your own alignment, because doing so will mean maybe you get swept, maybe you lose the position altogether, maybe you lose a lever, right?
Common mistake is that you never want to sacrifice your own alignment. So whatever you're trying to do, you need to make sure that you preserve your alignment while you're doing it. Sometimes people get greedy, and we did a whole episode on this, right? They get greedy, they think they see an opportunity, so they sacrifice their alignment to try to take the opportunity. I mean, I can tell you that most of the time when I get tapped out embarrassingly, it's because I was winning, and then I thought I saw an opportunity, and I just didn't take my opponent seriously enough, and I thought, I can get away with this. And then I left space, or I tried to skip a step, I let a grip go prematurely, and that's when I was made to pay for it, right? Yeah. That's why it is so important to make sure that you prioritize your own alignment over everything else.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Another thing too that is also critical for really almost any martial art is Kuzushi. Again, is something that we've talked about very, very heavily, but basically this is the Japanese art of balance breaking, right? It's foundational for things like judo. It is almost impossible to hit a judo throw on someone unless you have previously established Kuzushi, which means you've gotten them moving, you've taken them temporarily off balance, and then there's a moment to strike. But Kuzushi also does apply on the ground. I mean, it is not as critical as when you're standing, because judo is just so much based on momentum and timing. But if you can constantly keep your opponent off balanced on the ground, it makes it much easier to advance position. So, Matt, you previously given the example of forcing your opponent to post. That's usually one of the best indications that you have achieved Kuzushi when you're fighting on the ground, is if you force your opponent to post with their hand, their leg, even their head, then that usually means you have off-balanced them temporarily, and that is the time to immediately launch a follow-up attack.
Yeah, or even just force them to do any reaction. Like even if you're snapping them down and they posture, you can go for a bump sweep from the close guard. You know, they don't necessarily need to post, but I think definitely the strongest forms of Kuzushi will force posting, or what Danaher calls limb extension. Right? And in doing so, you usually create lever control. And then from there, you can use that lever control. You can sweep, get dominant angles, get the inside channel. A whole world opens up where before you were fighting a strong structure that seems immovable. Now, creating Kuzushi, you get lots of options. So
yeah,
finding out how you can basically take the human body and create vulnerability and movement, I think, is a really important part of creating opportunities.
Yeah, just a constant establishment of push-pull motions to keep your opponent off guard helps a lot. A mistake that I've made in the past is I just try to like do moves. You know, if I want to do an armbar, I'll just go for it. But if the guy is primed there and ready to fight and he can base, it's very challenging to do that. But if you get him moving a little bit first, then it's much harder for them to keep their base and to retract that arm. So I would suggest that if there's a move that you want to do, but you often find when you're trying to do it, like it's just like hitting a rock wall, the other guy is not moving the way that you need him to move. See if maybe before you do it, there's an extra step you can add that wobbles your opponent just a little bit. And that might help a lot in terms of the success rate of that move.
Right. Now, without discussing alpha aura, we should talk about creating opportunities in real life.
Well, what opportunities can you create without being alpha, really?
I know.
Being alpha is the foundation of all opportunity creation. No, that's a good point, actually.
Like if you're trying to advance your career, or maybe you want a career switch, right? Like basically falling into a routine, which, as I think humans, we are creatures of habit and routine. We
seek routine even when it isn't in our best interests to be that comfortable.
Yeah, yes. we seek comfort. We want to be as comfortable as possible, and a lot of the time that can prevent you from, opportunity and risk. But in at least in my cooking career, I mean, even in my jiu-jitsu career, I've never gained anything by not risking something. Now, did I do a risk versus reward assessment like we talked about in the last episode before every decision? Of course. I would never recommend running blindly into something. Sometimes you're forced into opportunities. I can remember one time I was working at a local pub and I actually got fired. It was the best thing that ever happened to me, because then I started working in hotels, and then I did my apprenticeship. And
is it because you got jumped by two guys and you beat them up single-handedly and then escorted your wife out of there?
No, we were smoking weed on shift. But basically,
it's effectively the same thing.
Yeah, basically. But actually, it was like one of the greatest things that happened to me, because it would have been more time wasted at that place when I could have been working in hotels and working towards my apprenticeship and yada yada yada. Had a career change, right? Like, and another thing, I was becoming, when I was a purple belt, I was starting to realize, hey, I really enjoy teaching jiu-jitsu. My goal before was teaching culinary arts. And I was thinking, hey, maybe I should think about having a school, because I don't think I'm going to be able to pay the bills being a professional competitor. That seems like a goal that's very reserved for the most elite of elite. Plus, even for them, I think it's going to be difficult to generate a reasonable revenue, right?
I don't know. I heard Gordon Ryan is like a multi-millionaire, at least according to his Instagram.
He's also the greatest of all time, Nogi. I'd love to see him fight Hodger, actually. That would be...
Have they never fought?
No, I mean, Hodger's way older, right? But, talking about the GOAT versus the GOAT, right? So, but anyways, back to, what were we talking about again? Oh, yeah.
You're talking about opportunities in real life.
Right. So, being stuck in my job at the hotel, which was, granted, pretty good for a life of a cook. It's like, at one point I had to jump off and actually say, okay, I'm gonna make a business plan, and I'm actually going to take the risk of opening a school. And however small that starts off, however I got to do it, I got to do something now, because if I don't, basically I looked at it like a 3 or a 5 year plan. If I don't plant the seed now, then I'm going to wake up 10 years from now doing this job and being like, fuck, why didn't I start this? Why didn't I start a gym? Like what was stopping me? And I think honestly, a lot of the time I'm motivated by regret. I think about the idea of regret, and that's what motivates me a lot. So, and it could be a great motivator, thinking about, envisioning yourself in a decade or 2 decades or even longer, and looking back and be like, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I try harder? Why didn't I, even if I failed, why didn't I try it and fail and know that I gave it my all, right? And a lot of the time, it's amazing what you can do. If you have, a decent resource base and you have a good network and support, like I had Mike Lee, who's my business partner, and luckily enough with him, he was like, hey, I'll help you open a school. I'll help you teach classes. I'll give you advice and stuff. And like, I wouldn't have had my gym without that guy. So, for all of you guys that are thinking about things like career changes, and maybe you really want that promotion, or maybe you think you want the promotion, but in reality, it's not the best fit for your lifestyle. You really got to weigh the risk versus reward. And at some point you will have to jump off, and it's a scary thing, but like, I think living with regret is far worse than trying something and failing. Just my opinion.
Yeah, some people get very kind of like myopic because you've been doing the same routine for so long, over and over and over again, that your mind kind of closes off to the fact that your life could be different. That's, I think, a very common thing. And that's when you get into the situation where people say, man, I regret the last 10 years of my life. I wish I'd done this sooner.
God.
And I think everyone has those things in their life that they just think, man, why didn't I do this sooner?
Yes.
Yeah. It's unfortunately, sometimes you don't see these blind spots around you because you're so used to being in your routine. And sometimes the world makes the decision for you. Like in the cases you've described, you're forced out of your comfort zone. And a lot of the time too, it's not even that you were in your comfort zone. It's just you didn't realize that there was another way. I mean, I know a lot of people are terrified of starting their own business. They're just absolutely mortified. To the point where...
And rightfully so.
Yeah. But like to the point where they don't even see it as a possibility. That's something that could be done. It's not that the door is hard to get through. It's that they don't even see the door at all. They don't even think about it. And that's kind of the risk of being myopic with your own life. I always encourage people to question the assumptions about the way that they live, and if there's anything that they could do differently, or any other opportunities that they're leaving behind. And to your point earlier, you always want to think about everything in the context of return on investment. If I put something into this now, what will come of it later? That's really just a good practice for any decision that you make. And if you're in a spot in your life where you're not happy with your relationship or your career or what have you, it's always worth asking yourself, just sit down and say, like, look, what is wrong with the situation I'm in right now? What do I stand to gain if I change it? What would I have to risk to change it? And what are the options to change it? So a lot of our listeners, they write in and they ask us questions about changing gyms. Like I get this all the time where people have emailed us and basically they describe some horrendous situation in their gym. And it's pretty clear that they've kind of already come to the conclusion that they need to leave, but they just need to push off the cliff. Like the reality is there's a lot of shitty jiu-jitsu gyms out there. And even if the gym isn't shitty, sometimes it's just not the right fit for you. But people are used to what they're used to. You get stuck in this routine and you need to kind of overcome the inertia of change. Change is painful. And sometimes you need to really think things through to understand that, hey, the suffering that I'll have to go through to change my situation is dramatically outweighed by the benefit to doing so.
Exactly. Yeah. You're describing my career switch to a T.
I would suggest that even if you love your job and you think it's really great, you spend at least once a year, you sit down and really think about, could I do better? And by that, I don't necessarily mean like I want more money. I mean, everyone wants more money, or I want a promotion. Everyone wants a promotion, but just like holistically, where do I really want to go? And what are the options that I have? And what options can I create? I mean, we benefit from living in a country where it is super, super easy to just go off and create your own business. I mean, yeah, it might fail, but like the risk to failure is pretty minimal. We're protected by some pretty strong bankruptcy law, right? There are countries where if you create a business and you fail, people will come and cut off your fingers and kill your relatives, right? Like we live in a pretty good place when it comes to entrepreneurship, and doing your own thing and striking off on your own is not nearly as scary as one probably thinks that it is. So, but that said, again, like you mentioned, I wouldn't suggest you just drop everything and do it right now. I would suggest that you sit down and create a reasoned risk versus reward plan. Like, what do I have to do to make something happen, and what would I gain in return for doing that? And what is the likelihood of things going the way that I want? Yeah. Always a good practice.
Like sometimes going into an opportunity is the wrong move. Like when I was cooking, I basically worked my way up to first cook, which is right underneath like management almost, or supervision. And I realized, like, if I give this up, I'm going to get like maybe $2 more an hour, or not even. And I'm going to have way more stress, way more responsibility. I'm not going to have the same hours. So there goes my jiu-jitsu training. And you know, if I go any higher than that, I basically have to give my entire lifestyle up. All to sacrifice just for a promotion. So sometimes like these things where you're moving ahead in your career don't necessarily fit your lifestyle. And that's where I think risk versus reward is super important. You got to look at yourself and sort of like write down on a piece of paper, like, hey, what are the currencies in my life that I want? There's health, there's free time, there's family time, there's money, you know, there's possessions, there's
alpha dog status.
Yeah. Well, I'm just assuming you're alpha if this is how you think.
Yeah. If you're not alpha, then this conversation is not for you. All you betas can go like listen to Matt Byrne or something.
Yeah. Oh God! First, you're making fun of Hinger's broken neck. Now
we've made fun of Hinger. We've made fun of Matt Byrne. We've made fun of Ari.
I actually haven't seen any Matt Byrne podcasts released. Maybe they're not on YouTube anymore.
Maybe we finally just demolished them.
No,
they've tapped from embarrassment.
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either. Well. Probably they're just busy with some like crazy world-class competition thing, or making another lapel encyclopedia, or
too busy meddling at ADCC, those bastards.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, sometimes the risk versus reward, and your if you assess what's valuable to you in life, you'll realize, hey, these opportunities aren't really opportunities. They're actually obstacles.
Yeah.
They're obstacles that are preventing me from what I really want. Maybe what you really want is like more family time, or you want to have kids, or you want to have more time to do jiu-jitsu, right? In my case, those were the things. And I knew that if I followed a career in culinary arts, as much as I enjoyed it and I was good at it, it just doesn't make sense. And because there's not a lot of money in it, it just made it super easy for me to take a risk, right?
And you also have to think about the long term too. It's not just about the reward that's put in front of you right now. It's where is the long road going to take me to? So like an example, you know, if you want to quit your job and go to a different job because maybe there's more money, or they're offering you a promotion, one of the things you also have to think about is, what is my ceiling at this new company, right? Yeah. Because maybe they give you a slight pay raise, or maybe they give you a slightly better title, but is there any way for you to get promoted even further at that company? Or are you going to wind up in a situation there where they just don't take you seriously enough to promote you, right? Different companies value different things. So what you don't want to do is get into a job where the company is comfortable with where you are. And this is something that people often completely fail to understand. When you are an employee, you're always thinking, I want a promotion, I want a promotion, I want a promotion. And you go and you bitch to your manager and you make the case. But at the end of the day, the company might want to keep you where you are, right? Maybe they think you're good in that role. Maybe they don't need whatever the next level above is, so they don't want to create a new position just for you. So it's in their best interest to just push you down and keep you there. Do you want to take a job where there's no future, where you go in and you get hired and that's immediately your ceiling? Yeah. So this is something you need to understand too when you're looking at like a job or a house or anything like that. Not just what is my immediate benefit to doing this, but also what is the path ahead? Like, what is the progression path? And I suggest if anyone is interviewing for a job like this, where this is a concern for you, don't just ask like, what is the title? What is the pay? But ask, what is your promotion strategy? What is the next level? Realistically, basically, do you honestly think I can ever get there? Like if you want to be a manager, you have to make sure that the company that you go and work for has a path for you to get there, and they are willing to take you seriously in that role, and they have a need for that role. So a mistake that a lot of people make, I think, is they just ram their heads into the wall and they keep begging and asking and complaining about this opportunity, but they're in a situation where they're never going to get it. And in that's when you need to quit and go and look somewhere else for that opportunity or start your own thing.
Yeah, I think like I'm one of the, can I say rare people who's an entrepreneur? I think, is that a fair statement? That
it's pretty rare. Most people are not.
Work for a corporation or a business, and less people have their own business. That would be a fair statement, I guess.
Definitely.
Like, I'll say this: I never expected to have my own business, and now that I have it, it's like a world. It's basically a world of freedom. It's incredible, and it's a freedom. It's basically a lifestyle that no amount of money could ever be worth, in my opinion. Like if I was
it is the alpha dog lifestyle.
That's right. Like if I was a CEO making $300,000 a year, as sweet as that would be, it's like, well, I still got to be at work 9 hours a day or 8 hours or even more, like, can I really put a price on the family time that I have, the exercise that I get, the freedom to run the business the way that I want? So, it fits so well into the idea of creating opportunities, because that is essentially what starting a business is. You're creating your own opportunities. And as long as you have, like I said, a good network around you of support, and you have skills and you have passion, and you're driven by passion and excellence rather than necessarily chasing the dollar, I think it's a good formula to be successful.
Yeah, something to bear in mind is that as a man, you have instinctive reactions passed down through countless generations designed to keep you and your loved ones alive. Yet in the modern world, it's quietly stripped away all of these precious skills that already exist deep in your subconscious. Society has pressured you to back down, act meek, and turn the other cheek. It has stripped you of your right to move through the world with confidence and self-assuredness.
This was written by a gamma.
This is just a lovely, lovely website.
This is how weak you are. You need this.
Yeah, you little incel bitch.
Yeah,
you need this. This is actually a common manipulative tactic that a lot of cults and these bad marketing companies use. Is they try to beat you down first so that then they can build you back up, or they try to create a problem so that then they can offer to be the solution to it. So. Yeah. Anyway, apparently all you need is washboard abs and 17 deadly techniques. Sorry, I don't want to undersell this amazing program.
17?
There's exactly 17 deadly techniques, and that's all you need to know. That's all you need to know. Everything else is just fugazi. You just need the 17 simple combative moves are all you need to defend you and yours. That's it. So anyway, I'm done reading this stupid thing.
It's pretty awesome.
It is actually pretty great. You want to just cap this thing up?
Do we have any questions?
I do. So first, let's maybe recap what we talked about today. We talked about dictating the pace. Dictating the pace is so important if you want to create opportunities, because it's hard to create an opportunity if you're the one on the defense. We talked about dominant angles. Good strategy if you need to create an opportunity on someone who isn't giving you something readily. If you can get around them, above them, below them, makes it very, very easy.
Inside them.
Oh God, inside them. Makes it relatively easy anyway to create an opportunity. We talked about defending with purpose, meaning when you're on the defense, you don't want to just shell up and sit there, or as Rob would say, take your ball and go home. Everything you do should be with the intent of progressing and escaping to a better position. We talked about win conditions. A lot of the time you can create an opportunity just by looking at the rules, figuring out what you are actually allowed to do that no one knows you are allowed to do, right? That's a great way to actually create an opportunity, because you can catch people off guard while still playing within the rules of the game. We talked about masking your intentions. If it's too obvious what you're trying to do, then your opponent can defend it before you even start. We talked about predictable responses. Sometimes the first attack doesn't work the way that you want, but if you know what your opponent is likely to do afterwards, you can queue up the response right away. That's a good way to create a predictable opportunity out of your opponent. We talked about a dilemma that was invented by John Danaher, never existed before him. Basically, it means you give someone two choices, both of which are bad, and they have to choose one. We talked about myopia, which just means you have blinders, basically. You're stuck focusing on one particular thing to the exclusion of all other possibilities. We talked about technique chaining, the concept that the first technique may not work, but if you continue to layer on more attacks, each one will progressively break your opponent's alignment more and more. And one of the best ways to create opportunities is through continuing to attack your opponent rather than just doing single attacks in isolation. We talked about Kuzushi. Basically, if you break your opponent's balance, that's going to create an opportunity every time. And we talked about return on investment, the idea that you want to do a risk versus reward analysis on pretty much everything that you do in life, especially in jiu-jitsu in this case. So we have actually a really good series of questions that are related to return on investment. Let's give this one a go. I think you'll like this one. It might make you cringe a bit.
Oh, good.
Yeah. I discovered your podcast in December and have been trying to binge listen as much as possible, but so far am only up to episode 19. So this person is going to have quite a ways to go before they actually hear this answer. I am loving the podcast.
That's a good point.
I already responded to this person, so they know what I'm going to say here. I am loving the podcast and I'm happy to have found a podcast on BJJ mindset. Episode 19, Injuries and Setbacks, really spoke to me, and it's something I'm going through right now. I was hoping to get your perspective on my situation. I have a few questions at the end. In November 2018, I was diagnosed with an eye disease in both eyes after the doctor discovered a retinal tear. This disease increases risk of retina detachment, and the doctor obviously didn't recommend I continue with BJJ or any contact sports, as head impact needs to be avoided. During this time, I was also promoted to blue belt after 2 years of training. I was devastated and didn't know if I could practice BJJ again. With the help of my coach, who I do private sessions with, I decided that I'd get headgear and goggles. This person sounds like me.
I have a student that wore goggles.
Yeah, I've actually trained with a lot of people who wear goggles. This kind of, we'll get to this at the end and we'll explain, but this kind of thing is not that uncommon. I decided that I'd get headgear and goggles and focus on technique and work towards doing drilling and flow rolling. I still wanted BJJ in my life, and I wanted to see if I could practice in while mitigating risk. It's definitely been challenging and frustrating, and as you mentioned in the podcast episode, there is a lot of ego and mental blocks to overcome. It was worth it though, because I could practice and be part of the community. Things were going great, so my coach asked if I was comfortable trying drilling and sparring with a bit more intent and intensity. I felt comfortable and wanted to try, as I had been doing light sparring using as little strength or force as possible to keep the intensity of the roll down, and found my techniques weren't effective. Last week, during one of our sessions, he accidentally heel kicked me in the face hard. I had to get my eyes checked out, so waiting for that was pretty stressful. Thankfully, everything is all right. I knew that practicing BJJ would still have some risks as it's a contact sport, but that it happened during drilling with an advanced belt kind of shook me up. I am in my mid-40s and do BJJ for fun, fitness, self-defense, and community. I think of Kauter's famous quote, "It's not how good your jiu-jitsu is, but how good jiu-jitsu is for you." And I remember why I still want to do this. I still want BJJ in my life, but health always comes first. For now, I have decided to try again. I know I am comfortable doing technique and BJJ mobility and conditioning. It's still not sure about drilling, and I don't know if I'll ever be comfortable sparring anymore. I'm also not sure about going to class. My questions to you are, number one, can I still learn and grow in understanding posture, structure, base without sparring or with more intense drilling? According to Reddit, never listen to Reddit, most people say it's a waste of time to learn technique without sparring or a resisting opponent. The dominant belief seems to be, without sparring, BJJ isn't real or BJJ is not worth the time. So Matt, what do you think of this? So the question basically is, can I still learn and grow in understanding posture, structure, and base without sparring or more intense drilling?
Yeah, I think so. But that is a crucial piece of your training. Like the live reality of grappling training is what kind of sets it apart from the traditional martial arts or the kata-based martial arts, right? So will an element be missing from the training? Yeah, for sure. But that doesn't mean you can't demonstrate posture, structure, base. It doesn't mean you can't improve or learn techniques or advance your game or your knowledge. It just means that it will be a slightly, I don't want to say reduced.
I think it's fair to say that. Like if you want to be honest, we've always said that the best training comes from resistance. And that's the reason why jiu-jitsu is so effective, is because unlike a lot of martial arts, you encounter realistic resistance. the reality is, of course, if you're not going in there and sparring realistically, yeah, the value that you get is going to be a bit reduced and you're going to probably progress a little bit slower. But that does not at all mean that you shouldn't do it. I mean, you'll still get some value out of it, right? It's not that you'll get nothing out of it at all. And I definitely would not listen to these people on Reddit who talk about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely don't do that.
Yeah, I don't know how true this is, but they always say that like Helio Gracie basically trained until he died, right? At like 95 or whatever. And I can assure you that at 95, Helio Gracie was not in there like doing like 5-minute to the death sessions with the students. Yeah. The reality is when you're younger, this kind of stuff about like rolling light, it weighs heavily on you because you want that intensity. But even for the best, most world-class competitors, age catches up to you eventually. There is going to be a time when you're going to have to turn the dial down on the intensity of your sparring. I don't care who you are. Like Rickson Gracie right now, I am sure that he does not go in there and try to kill himself every single day, right? Mm-hmm. Age, injuries eventually catch up with you. And as you get older, it gets to the point where jiu-jitsu becomes more about how it can benefit your life in other ways versus just winning on the mat, right? So I think you'll absolutely still get some value out of it. I definitely do. I think there's no problem with that. And there's no problem with managing expectations with both yourself and your partner. I mean, everyone has to come to a conclusion personally about what they want out of jiu-jitsu. And not everyone wants big, hard, competitive roles. And pretty much everyone who does jiu-jitsu, even the people who do it very casually, they'll tell you about how much value they've got out of it. So I think it's totally fine if you don't want super, super intense drills or super intense rolls, especially given what you've brought up above, right? Given risk versus reward, losing your eyesight is a pretty big risk. And if you can still get the enjoyment out of jiu-jitsu by not having that risk and not rolling intensely, I think probably that's a good decision for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Eventually, if you are, you dedicate enough time, you get good enough and knowledgeable enough, you could take a coaching role. Mm-hmm. And I'm here to say that, passing jiu-jitsu on to people is just as rewarding, if not more rewarding than winning competitions.
And oddly, it also makes your jiu-jitsu a lot better, which is something that probably we should talk about at some point in the future. Like the one thing that really surprised me as I started to take a more prominent coaching role was that you actually learn a lot by coaching other people. It's really interesting.
Would that be an example of interleaving, or is that something else?
Yeah, I'm not really sure what you'd call it. I mean, it's almost like there's like this inflection point when you're growing. There comes to a point in almost anything where there's only so much growth you can do personally, and then it becomes more about giving back and training the next generation. I mean, it sounds all hokey, but I've personally found that by teaching people, it has dramatically improved my knowledge and my ability within jiu-jitsu just because I'm forced to think through things that I had previously held as assumptions. So I don't know. Anyway, yeah, there's something about that like inflection point when it comes to growth where it suddenly becomes more valuable to help people than to be selfish on it. It's a weird thing. But yeah, I think that you can definitely still continue to train with low intensity, and I think you will get value out of it. So their second question: if I did just technique and potentially lighter drilling, how should I set my expectations? E.g., I should expect fun and fitness, but not much growth or progression. I think you should still expect that you'll grow and progress. I mean, maybe not as fast as if you went in there and just killed yourself every day, but there's levels and there's scales, right? I mean, I roll pretty intensely when I train, and I train maybe like 3-4 times a week. To some people, that might seem like a lot. To some people, that's a joke. That's nothing, right? It totally depends on what you want. I mean, even in my situation, there's people like Matt who train like 6 hours a day, right? I mean, it's just a completely different scale, and everyone's going to get value out of it. I mean, of course, you'll never be able to go in there with like Gordon Ryan and kick his ass, but is that really your goal in jiu-jitsu? Probably not.
I think Ari could.
Ari could go in there with, well, yeah, that's because Ari's got the 7 deadly techniques on the side.
17.
17. Oh, man, I'm going to get sued. And Gordon Ryan presumably has no deadly techniques. So, yeah. I mean, he's got arm bars and stuff.
Ari's going to sue us, not because we made fun of everything he stands for,
but because we misrepresented the number of deadly techniques he is demonstrating here.
Yeah, and to this person, to add on, definitely be selective of your training partners. There's nothing wrong with being very selective and rolling with people who are very controlled, not as much bigger than you, people you trust, right? So.
Yeah. And that actually ties into their third question here, which is, if I did go to class, do you have any advice on participating? I would like to go and do technique, but I feel bad for the person who is my partner because I can't participate in some techniques, drills, and sparring. So first and foremost, don't feel bad about that at all. Like, it is always a good idea to tell your training partner what you want out of the role. In fact, I suggest that for everybody. Like, never assume that you know what the other person wants during training. I was sparring with a purple belt today, and he told me he wanted 70% resistance, flow rolling only with no submissions for 4 minutes. And I was like, holy shit, that is very specific. but
then
like,
he spazzed out.
But yeah, it's very important to align with your partner on expectations. And like even world-class athletes will do this if they're like rehabbing from an injury. I mean, remember we talked to Oliver Taza, and he was talking about how like when he was rehabbing his knee, he was definitely setting expectations for his training partners and making sure he didn't go beyond what he was comfortable with. This happens to everyone at different times and just to different levels. So always, even if, this is not a concern for you, this particular situation, if you have any injuries, always disclose them to your partner and tell them what to avoid.
Yeah. And I think target sparring would be a good, you could probably train safer if you target spar, close the gaps of what's readily available for each person and focus on specific scenarios. I think that's going to, I would think that would make things safer or more controlled.
Yeah. And you can also, when you get into this point, like if there's limitations to what your body can handle, at that point, it's okay, I think, to critically start looking at the various techniques and strategies and tactics and remove the ones that might be too risky for you. Like, I would say, look at every single technique, and you might want to do this with the help of a senior belt who can really think this through. Look through every different technique and strategy and identify which ones of these are too risky given your injury. So, for example, if I were you, I would never do a single leg or a double leg takedown, just because
I was going to say, don't wrestle.
Yeah, because
you're going to get collar tied hard.
Yeah, well, just the act of rushing in head first with momentum, eventually you're going to get clobbered in the eye. It's just going to happen.
Yeah, it happens.
Whereas if you play something like De La Hiva guard, will probably almost never happen because you're leading with your legs and your head is far away. So just something to bear in mind. That you'll have to adapt your game for sure, but everyone has that after a bad injury. You have to adapt your game to make jiu-jitsu safer for yourself. And I would again say that any technique that involves leading with your head or putting your head within striking range, you want to avoid. The good news is there are myriad techniques and strategies that do not require you to do this. So I'd suggest maybe sitting down with a senior person, maybe your instructor, and just game planning and going through these techniques and figuring out which ones you think would be safest.
Mm-hmm. Generally, anything where you get your head grabbed or you're within range of getting your head accessed as levers, try and manage the distance so that it doesn't get to that. Yeah.
I personally have adapted my game very heavily in this way. I don't like people to get too close to my head because I just have way too much alpha dog testosterone and they might start kissing me, right? So I've got to keep these people at a distance. But realistically, I got to go to like an office the next day and I don't want to show up with a black eye. So a lot of this stuff I don't do either. Like I don't double leg. If I only do very select types of single legs just because I don't want to like get busted up that badly. It just isn't worth it for me when I'm only training casually. And I can tell you, I don't want to say never, but I rarely get hit in the head because I just don't put my head in the range for that kind of attack.
I get hit in the head.
Yeah, I know. That's why you look the way you do.
Yes. I get hit quite often, actually.
And I would also say, too, that, the goggle thing is not weird at all. I've sparred with several people who've had retinal issues. Usually it's related to retinal detachment concerns, like with you, and they often wear goggles or some sort of protective face wear. The problem with goggles is it's hard to find a good pair that actually cover your eyes properly and stay on. So I would say, in addition to the goggles, one of the most important things is just keeping your head out of range. Because if someone whacks you hard enough in the face, the goggles might not be enough protective material.
The goggles do nothing.
Basically.
Just remember.
All right,
so Simpsons reference for those who
got to have our weekly Simpsons reference. Okay, so I hope this was useful for you guys. As always, we're sponsored by alphanation.com/firststrike, where you can go to learn more about how you're lacking in alpha dog machismo. If you want to pick up, I don't think it actually specifies if it's, I guess presumably this works on anyone who's into alpha dog, but if you want to, learn these like 17 deadly techniques and like have all of the women love you and fight off ISIS terrorists and have six-pack abs, it seems like this program is the place to go. So anyway, yeah.
That's what the Hong Kong samurais do.
You got to go take a look at this page. Like, seriously, it's amazing some of the stuff they've thrown together on here. But no, seriously,
it's really creative writing.
It actually is. I mean, it's at like a grade 4 level, but it is relatively creative. If you want to actually get useful information, you can go to bjjmentalmodels.com, where we've got our database of concepts. We have a lot more information on the mental models we discuss here on the show. You can go to bjjmentalmodels.com/store. You can pick up gi patches and t-shirts that directly support the show. You can go to bjjmentalmodels.com/join. If you do that, you can join our mailing list, and we'll send more detailed information in conjunction with the episodes here. And if you want to see where we're up to or just get in touch with us, you can go to our Facebook or Instagram pages, and from there you can, again, just like see our garbage posts and reach out to us and ask us your questions. You can also contact us via the website too. There's a contact form there as well. Well, Matt, time to go home, go to sleep.
Great discussion.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to be able to sleep.
You're going to be up all night reading this this First Strike site. It's going to take you all night because that thing is gigantic. Anyway, yeah, if you are a user of Alpha Strike or First Strike or this thing, do reach out. I'm actually really curious to know how badly you were deceived. Anyway, talk to you next time, guys.
All right, see you guys.